I am really excited to be joined by Brad Nelson and Andrew Polk, two exceptional risk communicators and meteorologists that have worked in a variety of industries. Brad and Andrew, how are you guys doing today?
Rennie, I'm doing great. It's good to be a part of the panel and, discuss, some of the, you know, kind of how to prepare for what we're likely going to see as an active tropical season.
Yeah, I'm doing great as well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So, Andrew, I'll kind of start with you. It sounds like it's going to be another active tropical season. Last year we had 21 storms. This year we're predicting 21 storms, and kind of a somewhat of a repeat of a pattern, anyways, toward that we saw in 2021. We're expecting in 2022. How do you anticipate that that's going to affect various businesses as we go into the hurricane season this summer?
Yeah, I think the impacts can be wide ranging. Right now, from an outlook perspective, we are looking at the central Gulf of Mexico as a slightly enhanced risk for a more active season here this upcoming year. And with the addition of 21 tropical storms here in our forecast, that can put quite the strain on the Gulf Coast, but also on any offshore operations that occur in that region as well. It also goes well beyond the offshore industry. It also reaches into the live event industry and the utilities industry, especially along the U.S. East Coast, as we also have an enhanced risk in that part of the United States as well for this upcoming season.
Absolutely. So if you're a business that's kind of in some of these target regions, which is essentially along the Gulf Coast or Eastern Seaboard, what are some of the activities that businesses can take on today to start getting prepared for what may come later this season?
Yeah, the best thing to do is just preparation. Review any of your evacuation. If you're a live event, review your evacuation materials or your protocols for what to do whenever there is a tropical cyclone in the forecast. Even if it's not forecast to impact your location, it's best to have those materials prepped before time. From an offshore perspective, if you are working one of those offshore platforms, or if you are a helicopter operator, helping with evacuations of offshore platforms, uh, go through your preparation materials early. Maybe even conduct some hurricane drills to get that mindset of here are my action steps throughout the process of a tropical cyclone. I've already had conversations with a few of our customers already who have begun preparing for this upcoming season.
That's a good thing to bring up, Andrew, because I mean, here at DTN, we have such vast expertise in a lot of these, safety and weather preparedness plans that we can really help out through our risk communication. And, if you want to review those with us, I mean, like you've done, Andrew, a lot of our partners really find that quite helpful.
Brad, yeah, one of the other things that I thought was really highlighted is that it's not just tropical weather that we're expecting to be active. We've already had an active severe weather season, or mentioned drought and heat over across the central and western U.S. So wildfire concerns are there. Um, Getting into some of those threats, Brad, and some of the customers you tend to work with in the live event space and other industries, how to handle some of those types of threats versus maybe tropical? How does that differ?
Yeah, it's a lot different because when you're talking about a tropical weather and tropical systems, you're talking very much many days in advance planning for a cancellation or a postponement of that event. So what you're looking at in regards to wildfire or severe weather risks, lightning, tornadoes, what have you, that's more of a short-term, you know, big evacuation plans. You're looking at, you're trying to mitigate risk, not just a safety issue, but also your cost. How do you work with your insurers if you have damage, and how do you prepare for, things like, okay, I'm expecting a big flooding, heavy rain event. I know I'm going to have to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on, mulch bedding for paths, or I need to work on parking lots. I mean, it's a lot of that risk and cost factors really play into some of those short-term inclement weather threats.
Yeah, one of the interesting data points that Nathan shared was that there was, rather Jeff did, that was that there was $80 billion of damage from the hurricane season last year. But that's just the physical damage to assets. There is a lot more money that is either lost through lost production, perhaps a loss of revenue by having to stop certain activities. Andrew, when you're working with customers in the offshore space, and this actually ties into some global concerns of gas prices right now, what are some of the things that we tend to work on with our customers to try to minimize even some of the downstream effects like gas prices that can affect all of us when a tropical system starts to move in?
Yeah, the best thing that we do to try to help with our customers here, especially from an oil and gas production standpoint, is to maximize that operating window. The more time you can spend to safely operate when you have an impactful system in the area, the better for everyone, both for our customers and for consumers at large, because that means that there is more supply into the overall environment for those, gas prices at large. Um, and with that, it's really focusing on the impacts more than focusing on the track line itself. That is one thing that is very easy to fall into line, is to focus only on the forecast track line of a tropical system. And as we as meteorologists all know, that is just the center of the storm. Impacts go well beyond that center of the storm, and that is in the impacts from a wind, a wave perspective, storm surge, rainfall, all of those factors uh, are calculated into that prediction and that forecast as to when we can safely return to operations after an event has occurred.
Sure. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I was going to say, you talked about the impacts that are from tropical systems that aren't just confined to coastal areas, right? You're talking about well inland impacts even after the storm has lost tropical characteristics. One really big example that I can bring up is Hurricane Ike. I don't know if you remember that from some early September of 2008. That caused extensive damage along the coast, but farther inland, you're talking about wind gusts of 75 plus miles per hour, all the way into like Cincinnati and Columbus, much of the Ohio Valley area, and it caused extensive damage, almost derecho-like um, high wind event with a lot of power issues and damage all the way up through the Ohio Valley, up through New England. So it is important to understand that you know we're not we're not just focusing on impacts along the you know the eastern seaboard or the Gulf Coast. It's a lot of these big flooding and high wind impacts can go well inland across the United States.
Sure. I will look to answers from both of you on this because you work with sort of different segments of customers and how they prepare. But if you were to describe a high performing company in terms of mitigating weather risk, what are some of the characteristics of how they've implemented a plan, the types of services that they use that sort of elevate them to be mitigating the risk at a maximum potential? I'll start with you, Brad.
Yeah, I think, working with, from my experience, it's not, it's not some of these companies and some of these outdoor, event organizers and utilities, they don't put things to chance, right? They don't wait until, oh, my weather looks bad. I need weather support, and you haven't really prepared for that. They plan, months and years in advance, working with, professional, weather entities like DTN in the private sector to bring in risk communicator meteorologists, all the solutions that we can offer so that we can tell them not only the forecast, and you can get a forecast anywhere on your app or online, but we can actually tell them how it's actually going to impact their operations. So in the case of utilities, we know, okay, you are more susceptible in your infrastructure to coastal flooding, or maybe a high wind events in certain areas of your region, right? You're going to need to know exactly when those short time periods of greatest weather impacts are going to occur, not only to ensure that you can bring in the right people for overtime, you can get mutual assistance, but also save on costs, right? Like I won't need people until it starts here, and then you have people in place and you're ready at that time. So some of the best companies, yeah, I've worked with, they you know they're they work with professional weather entities like DTN, and utilize all they can into their safety planning well in advance
And
for these big events. Yeah.
Brett, I would maybe add to that too. If you think when you work with a meteorologist, what they'll be able to help you discover is some of the nuances of how even what appear to be minor weather changes can cause major impacts. So I think it's always interesting when we hear from a utility customer how if you took, let's just take an example of 60-mile-per-hour winds. If those winds are coming out of the northwest, it may actually not cause disruption to the grid based on
Mhm.
where those assets are set up, how the trees are set up, vegetation management practices. But if the wind's out of the south at the exact same speed, could be more disruptive to the grid as a result of that weather. So it's never just as obvious as if the wind is this, then you cause concern. We're focused
Right.
on trying to really dive into some of those specifics.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we have some um, East Coast utilities where they are a lot more hardy to predominantly westerly or northwesterly winds. Like they've built their infrastructure to handle those types of events, but maybe those big coastal systems like the nor'easters or the big tropical events that bring in more easterly or northeasterly winds, they're not quite as prepared. So that's where they might have some of those larger impacts that you're talking about.
Another application there is in the live event industry. I can think of a few customers that we've worked with in the past where they have an amphitheater that is situated in such a way to where if they have an easterly wind, it doesn't really impact their event too much because they're protected by a mountain range or maybe even like a large hill that is on a certain side of the stage. But they're predominantly susceptible to winds out of maybe like more of a westerly wind event just based upon how the stage is situated, or if they have a big video board that is more north south oriented. Working with a risk communicator can really help hone in on those fine details that could cause more of an impact than just looking at your phone app to find what the wind speed might be for a particular day.
Yeah,
There,
that the days out, they might decide, okay, we need to move these video boards or move them to a different direction based on, that wind forecast. So it makes perfect sense.
there's always, I call it leaky expense that occurs if you don't dive into that detail where you haven't totally looked at the all-encompassing risk profile from weather. So Andrew, I'll ask kind of the same question to you when you've worked with your customers. If you said, I'm going to draw the picture perfect customer in mitigating weather risk, what are some activities that you've seen that make a really strong impact?
I'll agree with what Brad just said. It's really the development of that weather risk plan and that emergency management plan ahead of time with those risk communicator meteorologists that is that first piece into being a successful I guess customer when compared to someone who might have incurred more costs than what could have happened from a minimization of that risk. And then it goes beyond that too, for throughout the duration of such an event, it is actually putting those action steps that you've planned ahead of time, putting those into action and acting upon them according to the plan. And then even after that event, it could actually be refining those initial plans as well. I've found customers who well, let's just take a tropical cyclone, for example. We went through the procedures and they found, oh, hey, we should fine tune our procedures a little bit more towards this because X, Y, and Z occurred with this event. We can do, this particular thing a little bit better next time to help to maybe maximize for a future event as well. So that it's developing that process and it's always in motion and it's always with that close contact of a risk communicator and a meteorologist in play.
Yeah, I love that evaluating performance and essentially what went right, what went wrong, how can we be agile in our development going forward of our plans so that when we need to activate them, they are crystal clear and tight.
Well, Rennie, I mean, I've worked with, a number of large outdoor events on site with, some high profile customers and events, and we're constantly every year, if we go back to the same place, we're constantly evaluating that safety weather action plan so that, and even the communication plans and the structure, so that are always improving and not just settling on, well, this kind of worked well last year and let's just do that again. It's always constantly trying to improve.
Absolutely. All right, I think that's it for questions for today. I appreciate the discussion, Brad and Andrew, and your insights on some of the steps to take to really mitigate your weather risk and build a plan, act on that plan, and continuously improve. And really appreciate everybody's attendance.